अज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनाशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टां स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वापदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरुं श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातां सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं श्रीकृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पश्यताय देशतारिणे। नमो महावदन्याय कृष्णप्रेमपदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्यनामने गौतुसे नमः। वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्त राधाकान्त नमोस्तुते। तप्त काञ्चन गौरांगी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौ भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्णा कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा। सो आप सभी का स्वागत है। Oh, I'm sorry, it's an English class. We welcome you all for today afternoon Bhakti Shastri class. We are continuing with our Isopanisad, text number 9. That's what we had read and discussed last time. So then let's have some discussion or recap of what we had discussed last time. So we have started our discussion on the fourth section of Īśopaniṣad, wherein we're going to discuss 3 verses, 9, 10 and 11. The 9th verse is as follows. Today we're going to just recite 9th, 10th and 11th verse because that's our part of discussion. We're not going to shloka recitation today. So everyone can repeat after. Andham tama pravishanti ye avidyam upasate tato bhuya ivate tamo yayu vidyayam rataha. Once again, looking at the meaning of it, we'll do it word by word. Andham tamaha pravishanti. Pravishanti means pravesh karna, to enter. Andham, ignorance, tamaha, darkness. Who enters andham tamaha is like a hellish place. Who enters that place? Ye avidyam upasate. Upasate, upasana means worship. Ye refers to those who worship what? Avidya. Those who worship avidya, which means those who adopt avidya in their life and culture, they go to andham tama pravishanti. So what is the avidya which is described here is the ignorant pursuit of sense gratification. Literally like animal kind of a lifestyle, where despite having a human form of life, the person does not bother to inquire about his own well-being. Rather, he spends all his life taking care of the needs of the mind and the senses. However, the verse continues, tato bhuya ivate tamo. But there's another category of human beings or society that is put into a further darkness. Tato bhuya ivate tamo. So who are they? Yayu vidyayamrataha. Vidyayamrataha, those who worship Vidya. Now, what is this in case of, what is this that if you accept Vidya, then you go into further darkness, is what we had discussed last time. We'll come back to it. So this is the 9th shloka, alright? Then we have a 10th shloka, which we're going to discuss today, 10th and 11th. What does it say? Anyadevahu vidyaya, anyadahura vidyaya. Anyad means some other. Evahu. You get some of the result from Vidya and some of the result from Avidya. Now question can be asked, how do you know that there is a different result obtained from Vidya and Avidya? Then the speaker, who is Manu in this case, who is speaking to Yagya Purush, he says, Iti shushrumadhiranam yenastat vichachakshire. This is not what I am saying. I have heard that one who follows the path of Vidya and Avidya gets a different result from Iti Shushruma Dhiranam. I have heard, thus, Iti means thus, Shushruma, I have heard from Dhira, from a sober person. According to them, there are two separate results. That is text number 10. So what is Vidya and Avidya here? Here Vidya refers to pursuit of spiritual life, Krishna consciousness, and Avidya refers to pursuit of sense gratification. Then comes the last verse in the series, the 11th verse, which says, Vidyam cha yastat vedho mayam saha. So one should cultivate Vidya, Avidya simultaneously. Avidyaya mrityum titva. Knowing very well that Avidya takes you to hell, Vidya amritamashnute, and Vidya takes you to eternal life. So what is Vidya and Avidya being discussed here? Once again, Vidya refers to pursuit of Krishna consciousness, and Avidya here refers to the needs of the body. The knowledge of the Jada Vidya, or the material knowledge, which is essential for the well-being of the body. So Avidya mrityam tirtva, knowing very well that this material knowledge will only take you to death. And a simple example is, whoever is born is sure to die. Now, somebody who has just cultivated material knowledge, he's just going to ultimately meet death. Nothing else is going to happen for him. But for a devotee, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, he reasons ill who says Vaishnava die. Vaishnava never dies. Yes, he knows, body has to decay, degrade and all that, body will die. Because one has cultivated spiritual knowledge, that will pave the way for eternal life. So these are the high-level concepts that have been discussed here. We had already discussed this differences between three last time, and let's come quickly to the purport here. And this was some of the things which purport talks about it. But before we get into a purport, I want to quickly come back to all of you and let's do a quick recap here. So last time, the 9th shloka talks about Vidya and Avidya. So andham tamaha pravishyanti. Ye avidyam upasate. So one who worships Avidya goes to andham and tamaha. However, the same verse says one who worships Vidya, he goes to further darkness. Can anyone explain what is Vidya in text number 9 refers to? Because in text number 10 and 11 it says that Vidya will take you to the path of eternal life. So what is that Vidya which is described in text 9 which takes you to a further darkness? Forget about eternal life. Anyone here? Yes, Danvats.
Here Vidya means those who know Vedas, but they don't know, they do it for the material desires. They don't do it for the devotional service of the Lord.
So Karma Kandis,
misguided understanding.
Correct. Karma Kandis, Vedavat Rathis, proper described. They are the one who have been described here as those who have knowledge, but they misuse the knowledge for material gain. Those who claim that they know and then they misguide others are said to be thrown into further darkness. That is what Vidya refers to here, which means it covers all our modern day scientists, educators, as well as all those gurus those who claim that they know how to attain God or how to become God, because that's not the essence of scriptures. That was the point here. So I'll give you a quick overview of what we had discussed last time, and then we're going to look into Madhvacharya's commentary here, where he gives a little different purport or the translation to this verse. But before we look into it, let's do a very quick recap of what we had discussed last time. So in the purport, if you see, Prabhupada talks about, in the very first paragraph, Vidya versus Avidyaya. And Prabhupada says, what is this material knowledge has given to us? It only has given to us stress, anxiety. We can say that people have become more comfortable today, or there is more comfort. But the matter of fact is they're comfortably disturbed and distressed. That they have lost their mental peace. So like that, Prabhupada describes about the influence of avidya in the first paragraph. Then in the second to fourth paragraph, Prabhupada talks about how, people worship avidya. In other words, it's like a fruitless pursuit of sense gratification. It's not that inclination to worship God is there only within those who believe in God exists, but that nature to worship, make somebody as one's idol, is there in every living entity. Either will make Krishna as an idol, or else will make Michael Jackson, Sachin Tendulkar, Virat Kohli, or maybe Mike Tyson, or maybe some female star as our idol. But everyone makes someone else as an idol. If not the superstars, somebody may have their own mother, father, husband, wife, kids as their idol. But ultimately, everyone have some idol. Last time we discussed an example of one such idol. I believe that was George Harrison, and how his used up towel was auctioned for hundreds and thousands of pounds. And that too, the towel was cut into 16 pieces. We just gave one example of that. And then finally, in the third and the last section of the purport, Prabhupada talks about Vidyayam Rataha. Who are these Vidyayam Rataha? The three things have been talked about. One is the modern education and the proponent and the followers of that modern education, who claim to know that we know everything but have no understanding of life. Second is Vedavatartas. They are karmakandis who are learned in scriptures but have no idea what is the application and implication of scriptures. And third is Maya Apratjnana, which means whose intelligence has been stolen by the material energy. Like there's three categories of people Prabhupada talks about. Avidyaya upasate, forgetfulness. What is avidya upasate? Prabhupada says avidya upasate means forgetfulness of Ishavasya principle, that is called as avidya. Then Prabhupada talks about modern godless education. We have discussed all this thing, that how our modern education system is not actually creating human beings, is actually creating more and more animals in the society, because it is polishing animalistic propensities and not the human spirit of cooperation, sacrifice and tolerance and character. It's hardly to be seen in the world today. So that's why Prabhupada talks about modern godless education. In the college life, we have discussed this. There is so much creation of material lust and greed for money, because mind creates desires and intelligence creates doubts, and both of them are entirely supported by modern education system and the culture that we live in. We'll discuss about some case studies today in today's discussion like that. And then there was a discussion on Vedavad Rataha, Karma Kanda, where they misinterpret Vedas, etc. They do things like that. And these are the verses that we had quoted last time about Vedavad Rataha. How they extract material knowledge from spiritual books, and sell it off for their own material gains. They never talk about God, and they talk about everything else. And the last thing where we had ended last time was in this discussion, Maya Apratjnana, where Prabhupada begins to talk about Mayavadis and Brahmavadis. This is where we had paused last time. We had, I believe, 1.5 hour discussion. So this is where we had covered up to. From now, this onwards, we'll discuss. So Maya Apratjnana, whose intelligence has been stolen by Maya. And Prabhupada talks about Mayavadis here. There was one very famous Mayavadi who came onto the stage and he said, I have not come here to tell you that there is a God or I am God. I have come here to tell you that all of you are God. This is what it means by Maya Aparit Jnana, where a person is so deluded and foolish that he cannot even understand how a God can be suffering. Is there anyone in this world who is not suffering today? And the Mayavadis go and tell, don't worry, you are God. So that is what is said to be Maya Aparit Jnana. And they're beyond reasoning. They cannot be understood. They cannot understand any logic. So, impersonalist. Impersonalist we have heard many times. What does this impersonalist means? It's a very important slide, a little technical, but there's something important for us to know. In Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada describes there are two kinds of impersonalists. So, a disclaimer. Many times Prabhupada would use the word impersonalist. We have to see a context to understand if Prabhupada is talking about Mayavadis or Brahmavadis. If you talk about the modern society, there is hardly any Brahmavadi. There are only, if any, impersonalists. Of course, there are many impersonalists. They all are only Mayavadis. Brahmavadis hardly exist. So what are Mayavadis and what are Brahmavadis? Mayavadis, they say there is no God. You are God, I am God. At the end of the life, Hare Krishna, there is no God, and at the end of the life, we all merge into that Supreme Brahman and become God. That is Mayavadis. So according to them, when Krishna descended, Lord Ram descended and all that according to them is illusion, is all material, it does not exist because God does not have a form. We are formless Supreme Brahman is what they are understanding. Whereas Brahmavadi, they also have a same understanding, but they do not reject the form of the Lord because they have yet not realized the form of the Lord. So they do not speak anything about the personality of Godhead like Krishna, Rama, Narayana or Nasimha, etc. They do not preach anything against them. Whereas Mayavadis, they are very vocal about the different personalities of Godhead. Rather say that we are them. Just like I was gave an example before, His Holiness Jayapara Kasai Maharaj was sent by Srila Prabhupada to Jagannath Puri, and there he went and met the head of the Shankaramat there, and he said, we need your help. We want you to please convey to the Pandavas who listen to you very well that we may be a white skin, but we have accepted Vedic culture wholeheartedly. So it's a message from Prabhupada to you that please speak to the Pandavas and facilitate our visit to the temple. So that Babaji or Maharaj said, oh, so happy we have come here. Your all desires will be fulfilled. Why you have to go and stand in front of Jagannath? The same Jagannath is standing here in front of you. Your darshan is already fulfilled. So no worries about it. Like that he kind of tried to make a discussion about. So that's what our Mayavadis are. So that's about type of impersonalist. With this, Prabhupada purport ends. But there is something very interesting that Madhavacharya talks about on the subject matter of 9th verse. So 9th verse says, those who worship avidya, they go to hell. But those who worship vidya, they go to further darkness. Madhavacharya gives a very interesting meaning, and he says, those who worship with false knowledge or the false knowledge, definitely they go to hellish condition of life. But those who worship true knowledge, they are pursuing Vedic knowledge, but they do not correct false knowledge. They fall into even a greater darkness. I'll repeat that again. I wish I would have put this into a slide. I don't have a slide for this. You all got the point that I'm making here, what Madhavacharya is saying? Even to pursue the path of a true knowledge is not sufficient if we do not correct the false knowledge. For example, if you read Prabhupada books, so many times Prabhupada will correct or criticize Mayavadi tendencies, right? Let's take an example of a parent. Now, as a parent, do you only tell your child what is the right thing, or do you also correct your child when he does the wrong thing? Say one or two. How many say, Prabhu, we do the second thing? We not only teach him the right thing, but we also correct him with the wrong thing. Yes? Everyone does it? That is what Madhavacharya is saying. Actual worship of Vidya does not mean that I only do good to myself. Madhavacharya says, it is also very important to correct the false misunderstanding, or the false understanding, not false misunderstanding, correct the false understanding. If it is not done, then it is said to be what is being described here, that the person who is trying to pursue true knowledge will go into a further darkness. So here a very important philosophy had been debunked. Oh, where is it? My presentation. Yeah, a very important philosophy. How many of you have heard, particularly the Hindus have this ideology, be good and do good to others is the goal of life. How many have heard this? शांति से रहो और शांति से जीने दो, हमें कुछ से कुछ लेना देना नहीं है. So the core of this philosophy is rejected by Madhvacharya. And he gives some very profound examples, which I like to quote to all of you. Is a very, very important section. We need to correct, Madhvacharya says, wrong done on the name of worship to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that is why you will find Srila Prabhupada being so heavy and so strong against Mayavad. So I understand some of you may feel, or let me ask, how many of you feel, why chase after Mayavadis? Why correct them? Let them understand, interpret the way they wanted to do it for themselves. And let us do what we want to do. Why have a conflict? Why offer a correction? Why say Mayavadis are rascals? How many of you have ever thought like this? Let's mind our own business. Why mess around with Mayavadis or why correct them? How many? Please raise your hands. Or probably you have never thought of anything like this. So let me give you a little more grosser example, a more practical example of this. So this is probably my third visit to ISKCON temple back in Columbus, Ohio. And there, for some of us, a Bhagavad Gita classes was started by a congregation leader there. And there in the class, this particular congregation devotee was a very highly enthusiastic devotee. Let's go for book distribution, let's preach. He was always in that spirit. So he sat down giving a class. So imagine if somebody is highly enthusiastic, he's definitely going to bring forward this point of preach. And that's what he began. We should go out. People are suffering out there. Don't you see their suffering situation? We should go out and preach to them. And blah, blah, blah. He went on in a Bhagavad Gita class. And I got a little pissed off. I said, why should I go out and preach? And I asked a question. And his good wife was also sitting there. And I asked the question. I said, Prabhu, I wanted to read, whatever my background was, I wanted to read Bhagavad Gita. I understand Krishna is God and all that. But why are you so much emphasizing that we should preach, people are suffering and all that? Who gives a damn about them? You be happy, let me be happy, let us be happy, let us be Krishna conscious, move on with life. Why to worry about so much things? So when I said like this, the Mataji, the wife, it's just like the Shivji Parvati role continues. Just like Parvati got upset with Chitraketu. Of course, I didn't offend Lord Shiva that this Parvati got upset with me. But nonetheless, mother didn't like me passing a comment like this to her husband, saying that, why are you, telling us we should preach? So the mother said, oh, that's all right. Mayank, you think like this. But as you progress in Krishna consciousness, then you'll be able to appreciate the point of view of my husband. In the mind I was saying, come on, that's never going to happen. And look, where am I sitting today? And that did happen. that transition did happen like that. So the point I'm trying to make is somehow a very deep-rooted ideology, and that has actually become a pain in the neck, as they say. Actually, this whole idea, be good and do good to others, actually destroyed all our Vedic culture. That's a whole big subject. I'm not going to get into details of it, but some very profound statement, shared by Madhvacharya. In fact, Albert Einstein said, the evil is not spread by the evil people. The evil spreads by the silence of the good people. I'll say that again. Evil does not spread by the evil people, but evil spreads by the silence of the good people. You might have seen in your preaching and outgoing programs also, there could be 100 people appreciating your good work, but they would not speak out publicly. They'll just come and say personally, on a personal basis, thank you and all that. But there could be one person who's really envious of Krishna consciousness, and he'll make halla gulla. And when he make halla gulla, everyone becomes quiet. And then everyone thinks that, nobody likes Krishna consciousness here in this neighborhood. That's the reason there's so much noise going around. And that point of time, if we all do not come together and show the strength of unity and actually really challenge the person who's trying to, discredit all the good work done and, the spread of Krishna consciousness, that is how the evil spreads. The moment the good person thinks that I got nothing to do with anyone, I mind my own business, fine, and that is how evil takes prominence in the society. So here, let's go back to the presentation. There are a few very beautiful examples. I will try to bring it to your notice on this subject matter to elaborate why Madhvacharya is saying that we should not stay silent on when it comes to ignorance. So I'm raising a question, why Srila Prabhupada is always so critical of Mayavadis? Let's take a look. There is something called as sin of commission and there is something called as sin of omission. What is sin of commission and omission? For an example, commission means to do it, to perform it, and omission means not to take any action. So here you'll see on the screen, you see Gandhari. Gandhari and Duryodhana is here. Let's go forward. Now the same Gandhari you see on the battlefield. This is the post-Mahabharat war scene. And she's sitting by the side of the dead body of her eldest son Duryodhana. And she's pointing a finger towards Krishna. A very, very interesting section that comes in Mahabharata. Here, Gandhari is chastising Lord Shri Krishna. And she is putting all the blame on Lord Shri Krishna for what had happened on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So this is actually the scene just before this description of Gandhari sitting right next to the dead body of Duryodhana. Prior to it, if you read Mahabharata, there's a very, very scary scene. And what had happened just prior to the scene, all the remaining Kauravas and Pandavas, now it is the time to perform final rites. So they entered into the Kurukshetra. And when they enter into Kurukshetra, now the description of Kurukshetra is given, how the river of blood is flowing, how there are a whole mountain of skulls hither and thither all over, dead bodies, mutilated bodies all over the place. And there's a very stinking foul smell, and there are all these wives from Hastinapur who have lost their husband, and they find their husband lying here and there. So there is a lot of hue and cry going around the scene. And then the scene comes on the side where Gandhari finds her dead son. She walks up to him, and then she becomes very angry. And behind, all the Kuru leaders along with Lord Shri Krishna is also there. And she turns to Krishna and she says, Krishna, you are to be blamed single-handedly for all this crisis to happen. You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You had all the power and might to stop this war. Because you did not stop it, which means you intentionally wanted this to happen. See, because of you, so many ladies have become widowed, and I have become, without any son. I had 100 sons, I've lost all of them. And you had all the control to prevent the war because you're the Supreme Lord, but you did not do what you're supposed to do. I am going to curse you. And at that point of time, now you see Lord Shri Krishna getting into action. He raises his hand. He says, hey, wait a second. What are you talking about? You cannot put a blame on me. I have not done a sin of commission. Sin of commission was done by your sons. And you are party of it because you did a sin of omission. What did it mean by sin of omission? You are the mother of Duryodhana. You, as a mother, you had all the strength, all the legal opportunities. You are the wife of a king. You wanted, as a mother and as a wife of the king, you could have controlled your son, averted the situation, but you never acted. Now you're becoming grief-stricken and you're putting all the blame to me. That is not correct. You are equally culpable for what happened on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Like that, Lord Shri Krishna argues back and tells Gandhari that whatever has happened because of her mistake. So that is, she was party of sin of omission. So sin of commission, Duryodhana is died, and because Gandhari did sin of omission, for the remaining part of her life, she had to continue to suffer, without having any sons left. And it was just she lost all her relatives. And on top of it, now Dhritarashtra and Gandhari had to live in the house of the Pandavas, under the care of the Pandavas, and the personal caretaker that Yudhishthira had appointed for both of them was none other than Bhimsen. It was such a difficult situation that they had to go through like that. So, few important lessons for all of us from this storyline. Indulgence in grief, just like Gandhari did, and as we know that Gandhari cursed Lord Shri Krishna. Indulgence in grief only increases grief. There is no point of getting into grief or talking or complaining about it. This is just we get carried with emotion. There's no point. And the more you get carried, further you'll continue with that particular thought and make blunders, just like Gandhari made a mistake of cursing Lord Shri Krishna. Second thing, the strength of demoniac people is the inaction of good people. So what was the strength of Duryodhana? Was the inaction of Dhritarashtra and Gandhari. Yes or no? How did he become powerful? Because Dhritarashtra and Gandhari, along with Bhimsen, Drona, Kripacharya, did not took a step forward. Just like an assembly of Kauravas, when Draupadi was disrobed, a sin was commissioned. By whom? Duryodhana and party. Because of which Lord Shri Krishna said everyone would be killed. The whole Kaurava race will be destroyed, right? So now question can be asked, but Bhishma Dev was not in favor of it. Dronacharya was not in favor of it. They didn't support it. But why did they die? They also died? Because they were party of sins of omission. They were in a leadership role. They had that strength and legal options with them by which they could have averted that insulting situation to Draupadi. But they did not do it. So Duryodhana suffered death once because of his sins of commission, but sin of omission is far severe and have a far greater consequences, because after that incident that happened there with Draupadi, because of the sin of omission of Bhishma Pitama Dronacharya, they suffered thereafter, or they died every day because of the guilt. Because a dharmic person saw adharma unfold in front of his eyes, could not have anything worse for him than that. This kind of disrobing acts were not a common acts in those days. If time permits today, we'll a little bit speak about the Vedic culture. What was the Vedic culture? There was hardly a scope of lust. The culture and the society was organized in such a way that no man would ever dare to look at any other woman with any bad eyes. There was never an opportunity or a culture around that time. In that situation, a chaste lady, a married woman, the wife of the king, because Yudhishthira was a king of Khandava or Indraprastha, and not only Indraprastha, he had become the king of the whole world. To insult a wife of the king who is worshipped as a goddess by the citizens is no lesser offense to any Devata or Devi. And that offense they allowed to perpetrate in front of their eyes. So these personalities died every moment because of guilt. Let's go a little bit more back in the story and go to Ramayana. If you see Jatayu, Ravana and Sita. Ravana had done an act of sin of commission, right? He had kidnapped Mother Sita, and Jatayu came in between and he fought with Ravana. Now Jatayu's act of fighting with Ravana has been glorified. Jatayu knew, I have no chances of standing in front of Ravana and I'll be killed. But if Jatayu would have allowed the act of perpetration and that violation to continue, then he would have become party to it as of sin of omission. He did not allow that to happen, just like Bhishma Pitama allowed Draupadi to be disrobed. And because of which, for the rest of the time, eternity, he will be blamed that in front of his eyes, Draupadi was disrobed. Nobody can say in front of Jatayu, Mother Sita was kidnapped. Why? Because Jatayu gave up his life to protect what is right. And what was the end result? Lord Ram personally came and performed the final rites to Jatayu. So sin of commission is okay, but sin of omission is considered far greater. That's the reason it is said by Albert Einstein, very interesting statement. Anyone like to read out loud what Einstein says?
The world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch them without doing anything.
Yes, and that is the point. So therefore, what count is not what we are, but what we make or what we are, So Jatayu versus Bhishma, if you see this whole storyline, Bhishma was a great warrior, but it doesn't matter. When there was an opportunity for him to exercise his strength, he did not act. Jatayu was a mere bird, but yet he acted as a warrior, and he tried, hampering the plan of Ravana. So that's the point. The world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch them without doing anything. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada, very strongly corrects Mayavadi tendencies to set it, to have a right understanding. And that's the reason behind it. And Madhvacharya already makes a point in this particular 9th verse that what is Vidya goes to hell refers to those who even pursuing the true knowledge but do not correct the wrong things. With that, we come to the conclusion of this verse. These are quick summary charts. We can take a look at it. I hope the screen is visible. Yes. So ignorance versus knowledge, avidya versus vidya. What is more dangerous, avidya or vidya? Prabhupada explains so-called vidya. And what is the proof? Prabhupada gives modern civilization is more advanced yet unhappy. What is real vidya? Supreme Lord is Ishavasya principle. What is real avidya? Forgetfulness of Ishavasya principle. Examples of avidya, as Prabhupada gives in the purport: advanced civilization is godless and more dangerous than less educated. And second, karmis, 99% of modern society. Just like, we just talked about Albert Einstein. When Albert Einstein escaped from Germany, he had sent a letter to the US president saying that Hitler is working very fast on developing a nuclear bomb. So you might have heard of this, right? He had notified the American president that you please start working on this technology before Hitler gets it into his hand. So it is described when America had dropped 2 nuclear bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, then Albert Einstein had visited that place to see the after effects of the nuclear bombs. And it is described when he went and visited that place, he exclaimed, "For the rest of my life, I will regret writing that letter to American president because of the destruction that bombs had caused, the havoc that had caused." And that is what it means through here when we're talking about, examples of avidya. Advanced civilization is godless and more dangerous than less educated. So all of our use of intelligence has only gone in finding out technologies, weapons that can shorten our life and not increase our life. What are the categories of avidya? Prabhupada talks about Vedavadaratas, Maya Pratgyanas, and gross sense gratifiers. There are things like this. Who are Maya Pratgyanas? Atheistic demons, self-made gods, think God is in Maya and accept ordinary rich man as God, but they neglect Supreme Personality Godhead. Mundane educators, Vedavadarataha, they pose as the learned people but are diverted from the real purpose. They have no interest in Supreme Personality Godhead but fascinated by fruitive activities. They misinterpret Vedic literatures, condemned Puranas, fall further down than ignorant. They do not have faith in any disciplic succession or any guru, and they present unscrupulous understanding. So with that, we come to conclusion text 9, which describes that those who neglect spiritual knowledge enter into darkness. And the focus, would anyone like to read the focus and the described part? Please go ahead.
Focus is on the difference between ignorance, knowledge which is harmful, and knowledge which is beneficial. Describe different ways in which material knowledge can actually be harmful to society and why ignorance may be preferable to such knowledge.
So a quick question for all of you here. Before we go to the 10th verse here now, can you give 1 or 2 examples how material knowledge can actually be harmful to society? And in this case, how ignorance can be preferable to such knowledge? Any example? Any example where material knowledge can actually be harmful and ignorance in that case could be preferable over to such knowledge? Anyone?
Probably I cannot think of a scenario where ignorance is beneficial, but at least for this example, where the material is harmful, we can say modern medicines, there is a side effect for it. So it is a knowledge that mankind has developed, but it has side effects also.
Okay, so let me just bring back the question again. The lack of clarity about the question. Where the question is, where the material advancement and technology has proven to be harmful and the ignorance of it is actually beneficial. In other words, any technology that comes to mind that has only created disturbance in the lives of an individual and that of the society. It's just like, you can't live without oxygen, water and food. But today, some things in the technology has become almost like that. Any examples? So Kumar and Hare Krishna Prabhu, please go ahead, your hand is up. Kumar. Yes.
Like I would like to see Jataparata personified this because of this only, like he acted as a Jataparata, like
No, I'm asking, fine, I'm asking in the modern society, anything that comes to your mind, where the knowledge of the modern technology has only brought destruction, can actually be only harmful to society. Any material knowledge from the modern time. So, Manisha Gupta, Mother Manisha, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna Guru. The replacement of ox in the farming field with the tractor has disturbed the balance.
Okay.
Because now this has promoted the cow killing also.
Okay, very nice. So tractor, automation and all that. Anything else? Mother Reshma. Okay, GMO, genetically modified organisms of the crops, fine. Who else? Sudhir Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. People say like what we get if you worship some trees and all, they treat them as fools, but still few people worships. That ignorance is a bliss in this case, where we don't care what other things and will continue to worship trees and all.
Okay, but I have a very specific, precise question. Anything from the modern society or the material knowledge which is actually harmful and the ignorance of it is good for us? Mukundan Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yes.
So all these social media games and all these apps, mobile app games and all that,
I mean, that's one thing. Life was all good. I don't know, maybe you were afraid to say social media. Nobody said social media so far because it has become almost like a water and rice for us. It has to have 3 times consumption in a day. How would I live my life without social media today? So probably you didn't thought of it. But it has become such a...
Social media has acquired a very broad connotation now, Prabhu. And even in Krishna consciousness, we use social media for good purposes. So it's both boon as well as a bane from that perspective.
Srila Prabhupada, in his 12 years, established 108 temples, ran a worldwide society, and all these 12 years he only made 2 phone calls. That's itself evidence that we don't need to depend on any social media to spread Krishna consciousness. Of course, I do acknowledge the need of it. We are sitting on an internet and all that. I'm not against it. But in a personal life, we are discussing. But when it becomes an excuse that, no, this is needed for technology, this is needed for preaching, so I need to be on social media and all that, that's where the whole dangerous situation starts. Now, even the kids are having their YouTube channels. This is too much now. I remember when I started this Ramayana and Mahabharata series for the kids, by the end I ended that 3-4 months of course with the kids. Many of our kids had their own YouTube channels then by that time. That's just not needed. So I mean, point is, Prabhupada did created a worldwide revolution with two phone calls, and he did not had a phone with him. He only once had a phone line with him, and that phone unfortunately rang at 12:30 in the night. And somebody from different part of the world called up Prabhupada to ask, Swamiji, I just called up to check on you, how are you? Prabhupada said, Raat ko 12:30 baje. You about know the better time to ask about my well-being. That too at the 12:30 in the night, you're calling and asking me. And then the very next morning, Prabhupada told his servant, get rid of this nonsense. It's creating disturbance. I'm not able to do my translation and dictations here. Okay, so yeah, same thing can be said for internet like that. So there are a lot of things on which we apparently feel like we're totally dependent, but actually it's creating a lot of risk. Let me put it this way. How many of you have seen it from this direction? Let's say this way. All of you are educated, young technocrats, and all of you are pretty tech savvy. But we understand with technology there are also a lot of glitches. There are a lot of chances of slipping away into wrong domains and the zones. Imagine you have your parents who are not tech savvy. You might notice them, they have no opportunity of slipping into those wrong directions. Yes or no? Many of our seniors really don't have any understanding of how the social media functions. They have never used internet because some of them come from village background. They just never were kind of tuned up to the city life and all that. When we look at them, we have to do so much things to ensure the security of integrity and everything of Brahmacharya Ashram. Now these fellows have no idea, because they have no idea of it. They're all absorption in Srimad Bhagavatam, because they have no other place to invest their time and energy. So that way is fantastic. So that was just one small example on that. So with that, we kind of conclude the 9th verse here. Anyone have any one or two quick questions on it, or shall we go to the 10th verse?
Hare Krishna?
Yes.
So, Prabhuji, you mentioned about the error of omission and commission, and how the error of omission has a far derogatory effect as compared to the error of commission. So, but sometimes we are in a dilemma whether to do something or not, right? So, from here it seems like you better do the wrong thing rather than not do. So, is that the logical understanding from this? What you're saying?
I really didn't understood what you're trying to say. Let me put it in context once again. From a point of view of a dharmic person, there is no chance for him to do commission. But if he becomes party to a sin of omission, then the guilt feeling arising because of it will kill him every moment. So just like Jatayu, just did not see Ravana kidnapping, just like Bhishma Pitama allowed that disturbing to happen. Vidur was also there, but Vidur walked away. He revolted it. But when nobody heard him, he said, I cannot, he walked away. So according to Vedic principles, if you have that strength, ability, the leadership role, raise your voice. Stop from that happening. That is first thing. If in case nobody listened to you, or you are just an ordinary devotee or a citizen, you have that influence that you carry around that can influence people, and if there is some unfortunate thing is happening, then you should not just be a silent observer. You should immediately walk away from there. And of course, you should call out for help if that's possible. But Bhishma Pitama kept on sitting on his chair. He turned his face away that he would not see what's going to happen. But can you imagine the hue and the cries of Draupadi? How that would have haunted Bhishma Pitama for the rest of his life? That I allowed my daughter to be publicly disrobed. This is something entirely unheard and unspoken. Even you can't even imagine such thing in those days in the culture like that. That is a point of sin of omission here. All right. Yes. So by the way, who is the host acting today? Nitai Prabhu, yourself or Harina Prabhu? Either of you have to call out whoever has a hand up, okay? So I will not do that. Either of you can do so. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Prabhu. I think it's Harinam Prabhu who is managing today.
Okay.
I have got a question, Prabhu. So as you mentioned, that sin of omission is that if we're being silent and we are not arm's trained, if someone is being blaspheming. But if let's say someone has the nature of being silent and he's not that outspoken, then what one should be doing in such cases?
See, somebody could be introvert and so forth. He doesn't want to speak. That's okay. Then that person should walk away from there. As I said again, Bhishma Pitama, like Vidura walked away. Vidura
that will then cultivate the habit of being guilt always, that I walked away from that place because I didn't have the courage to face the situation.
See, these are the things which are allowed, which are acceptable. First is you should stop that from happening. And it is possible that we may not be in a situation to act. There could be a situation like that. We just was not, and acting would be considered the best, but it is possible that we were not in a situation to act because it would just not have made a difference, or even, I would have put my own life at risk because it was beyond me to do anything. There could be a situation like that. At that point of time, just walking away from there, at least you did not supported the sin to let it happen. And of course, it doesn't mean you walk away and then you go inside your bedroom and you put your pillow over your mouth and you go to sleep and think, oh, I'll forget about it. Of course, you need to do the needful action, call for help, whatever can be done. At least inform others who can do needful thing. So sin of omission means not to take any action. That is what it means. You being silent doesn't mean that you do not take a call for help from others. Then it leads to guilt. You may not have that ability and strength and the courage and influence to do the needful thing, but you can at least think of calling of help. So that at least that attempt, that's the point here.
Thank you.
Shashank Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Guruji.
Yes.
Guruji, like the Mayavad principle is certainly disrespect to the Lord, but at the same time, it also is negative for the society as a whole. Can you please comment a little bit on this, that how it is negatively impact the society, that principle of Mayavad?
We're going to discuss that ahead also, about this Mayavad thing. Actually, Mayavad thing is a very dangerous thing actually, when Mayavadi says that they are spiritualists. Because they give a very, very bad example and a bad taste of spirituality. Because what do they teach? According to them, after that there is nothing. There is no ananda, there is nothing. Which means it's just simply boring. So if somebody shows interest in spirituality and ended up in the hands of Mayavadis and he says, oh, there is nothing after death, is either you call void, which is a Buddhistic or philosophy, nihilism, like that they say, or you call we merge into Brahman and there is nothing, there is only Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So many can actually become discouraged from that whole thing. There is no rasa. There is no flavor. Just like there was one Western devotee who had come to India. I was attending a Kumbh Mela. I might have given this example before. And after 3 days or 2 days of his stay at the Kumbh Mela, the Pandal, nearby there was a Mayavadi camp, and they saw, oh, Western body fellow. So they invited him and asked him to stay with them for 2-3 days, and they will take him to meet the leader of that Panth, the Mayavadi group. So this young man who had just recently got connected to ISKCON, he said, oh, really, I'll get to meet a very senior person, so why not I go and stay? So he was asked to stay there for 2-3 days, and the very next day he left. So when he was leaving, they asked, what happened? He said, no, I don't like this place, that ISKCON camp is better. He said, why? He said, you feed me 3 times khichdi, they feed me gulab jamun jalebi. At least there is some flavor. I'm going back to the ISKCON camp. So in Krishna consciousness, there is a variety, there is a flavor. That's the reason people from all kind of background get attracted. There is a music, there is a cuisine, there is a particular culture. In Mayavadi, there is complete zero. So they present a very, very bad example of spirituality, and people, that's the reason think spirituality is either about boring life. That's the reason people think spirituality is all about only following rules and regulations and no fun. And that's the reason people think about spirituality means giving up everything. And ISKCON is entirely opposite of these things. ISKCON does not mean giving up anything. Somebody asked me that, somebody was telling me I had gone for program, Proji, you are very big renunciate, you are Tyagi and everything. Not Mr. Tyagi. Tyagi means, renunciate in that way. You have given up everything. So he was asking about this renunciation. So I said, sorry, whom are you talking about? You're talking to me? What have I renounced? I have not renounced anything. I talk to my parents once in a week. I talk to my family. What have you given up? If you see the monks in ISKCON, what have they given up? They have only given up one thing called as suffering, which they otherwise had to face being outside in the world, working hard day and night, trying to make some money for themselves, maintain the family and whatnot. What else have we given up? We have not given up family. Everything is there. They say, they say Mayavadi, would present a very boring example of spiritual life. But our life is colorful. We have so many festivals, isn't it? We just had Janmashtami celebration. Do you know of any spiritual organization where the people they begin with the morning with a dance? And in today's world, people only can dance after 2 packs. जब तक 2 पैक चलाते नहीं, लोगों को घूमना नहीं आता. एंड यहाँ पे मॉर्निंग में उठ के नाचना शुरू कर देते हैं ISKCON के वक्त. So ISKCON presents, or Vedic culture presents, a very dynamic and a rich culture, which is filled with all kind of rasa and flavor. And that's the reason all of you, all the educated young man and woman and couple are getting attracted into it. Imagine sitting a Mayavadi sannyasi giving you a philosophy of Mayavad, Om Shanti Shanti. I don't know still how come you guys tolerate me for 2.5 hours. You would not have tolerated him for 15 minutes. Well, what does he has to give you? He just talks about negation. Mayavadi is all about negation, na? Give up this, give up that. Everything is false. So Mayavad in that way is a big threat to society because it takes away innocent people. If you see why in India there is so much misunderstanding about spirituality, why the parents become so worried if a young man and daughter goes to ISKCON temple, they think, oh, sannyasi ban jayega. No, it's not like that. In ISKCON, it's not like that. Even if you see here, 99% people are a congregation. So they have kind of set a very wrong example, very negative connotation of spirituality. It is only ISKCON which have brought about the real picture of spirituality. Otherwise, none of us would have ever got connected to any spiritual organization. Even if you would have got connected, we would not have progressed or lasted with them for all this while. And some of you would have already, or might be possible, some of you were connected with some spiritual organization, probably got fed up and then doing window shopping, you ended up in ISKCON and got stuck. I have seen many devotees like that. Well, there's nothing. There's no joy of life. That's the point here. All right, Shashankji?
Yes, Guruji.
Jai Prabhu.
Prabhuji, so when we are saying that we should stand against Mayavadis, at the same time we also say, right, that it is an offense to instruct about glories of holy names to an unfaithful person on those lines. So my question is along the lines, where to draw the line? Because when we are in conversation, in casual conversation, sometimes with people of different faith like Jains or someone, they have proved that ultimately we can become God. We are having casual conversations then. So at that time we cannot strongly oppose them or teach them, or how should be our behavior to put our philosophy or to stop
See,
them.
for everything you have Srila Prabhupada's example. When Prabhupada was in a public forum with any members of interfaith, Prabhupada was always very respectful towards them. And through his own example, he taught us. But whenever we are in our own forum, to save and to teach our students, at that time we should bring out what is right and what is wrong. Alright? First thing. Second thing, if somebody is publicly speaking anything wrong about Krishna consciousness, that is the time you have to speak what is right. If you have that knowledge base. If you don't have the knowledge base, at least you should walk away from there so that you don't get contaminated by listening to that gibberish. So these are some of the things that we can do it. If you have the opportunity to do an offense, do an offense. Offense, I mean to say, attack. Which means you start and share what's the right thing. If you think your knowledge base is not that strong, you can't quote scriptures and all that, fine, then walk away from there. Don't waste your time. At least you should not get contaminated listening to that. And whenever we are in a public gathering like that, we have to be very respectful. We don't go up on the stage and say, this Mayavadi rascal who invited me for the program, and this foolish Jain who sits here, and Buddhists, they are the biggest, the fools of this whole universe. They think nothing exists after the life. And what to speak of the Christians and Muslims? They are jihadis. Probably you would not come back in one piece. So the common sense has to be there. We don't behave like this. Okay? Hare Krishna. So we'll move forward now We'll take more questions as we move forward with this. Let's start with a little bit of next verse. And after some time, anyway, is going to call for a break quickly. So let's go to this slide, text number 10. And here comes the text number 10. I hope every one of you is able to see the slide here. Anyadevaho vidyaya anyadaho ravidyaya iti shushruma dhirana mena sat vichachakshire. Please read out the translation quickly, somebody. Either the host can read himself or whoever. Go ahead.
Wise had explained that one result is derived from the culture of knowledge and that a different result is obtained from the culture of nescience.
So in text number 10, what's the connection here? Mantra 9 described the result of cultivating ignorance and false knowledge. And Mantra 10 explains that cultivating true knowledge brings a different result. So avidya and false knowledge gives a different result. And text number 10 establishes that cultivating real knowledge will give us a different result. That's the point. What's the main theme being described here? Real knowledge means following of a process to realize one's true eternal nature. And this must be obtained through iti shushruma dhiranam, from a sober person. Who is a sober person? One who has been trained up under the guidance of another bona fide teacher like that. Anything which inhibits this realization is called as nescience. Text number 10 overview. These are the purport wise, paragraph wise division. The first two paragraphs talks about vidya leading to desirable qualities, and then paragraph number 2 to paragraph 5, avidya leading to undesirable qualities, and the concluding part is the 6th to the 9th paragraph, where only dhira can teach us vidya. So at large, in this particular verse, 10th verse, Srila Prabhupada brings out the 18 items of knowledge, quoting 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, verse number 8 to 12, where Prabhupada says, this is knowledge, everything else is ignorance. So we're going to read it out, that thing. But before we read out, I want you to, if you have a pen and paper, write down few things. And then when we're going to read those qualities, think about how these categories of people today do not have this as a quality, or as being a part of the society, being into these following roles, how these people just do not have these qualities. I'm not saying by birth, but by association and the culture that they have lived in. Is that okay? So 4 categories that we're going to write is, first is a student. So you can just make a little table, write down student, and we'll look into the qualities in a short while. So the question that I'm saying is, when we're going to read these 18 items of knowledge, you have to think about how, of course, you will say that Prabhuji, they have none. But I'm just saying the foremost what they lack is what I'm saying, okay? Is that clear? Let's say student. So when you're going to read 18 items of knowledge, according to you, what do they lack the most? Don't say they lack Krishna consciousness. Of course they lack Krishna consciousness. But from a general point of view, what they lack. That's an example of it. Just think about it. Then you'll get to know where our current society is headed to. This is what is happening because of the influence of the modern culture and how far we have come from the real culture. First is the students. Second is, you can call professionals or the scientists. I'm putting them into the same bar, professionals and the scientists. Third category are the pseudo-religionists or the false gurus. They claim themselves to be Sadguru, but they are not Sadgurus, they are false gurus, bogus gurus like that. And the last category you can have of nationalists. They have this whole spirit of Mera Desh, Meri Dharti, So there are 2 sides of it. If you look at our Indian thinking today, there is one side of nationalist and another side of pseudo-secularist. According to pseudo-secularist, everything with India is wrong. India has never done anything good, can never do anything good. According to nationalist, anything good in this world exists is because of India and Vedic culture. India can never do anything wrong. So these are 2 extreme ends of it. And to give an example of it, Nehru ji He had written a book of History of India, something like that. You know, there was this whole series also by him that used to come in Doordarshan back in those days. There he had explicitly, he himself speaks, and then he makes sure that the history books are written in that way, where he writes that it is so foolish to offer worship or bow down in front of idols and to do all these rituals which are given in Vedic culture. But as a leader, I am supposed to quote Sanskrit verses because it is expected of me. That's the reason I am quoting it, although I do not believe. He himself says like this. The second thing, when the history books were being written post-independence, he had made it very clear not to glorify, not to give any mention to Vedic rulers and Vedic culture or Vedic India. Second thing, do not demonize or do not talk about anything what Islam have done to India. Do not speak the truth about Islam and do not speak the truth about Vedic culture. Which means what you read in history books is the false Vedic culture and a false Islam which is being presented, where the Islam has been shown in a very glorifying way, that what Akbar did, this and that king did, and the Vedic rulers have been shown largely in a derogatory way. Or even if there is some paragraph appreciation which is very, very short paragraph like that. So with that, let's come back to the reading of the purport. We'll read the purport and then we'll take a look at these qualities. So once again, the 10th shloka says, ones who follow avidya will have a different result. One who follows the path of vidya has an altogether different result. That is our 10th verse. So somebody please read out now, purport, the first 18 items of knowledge that Prabhupada writes here.
As advised in chapter 13 of Bhagavad Gita, 13.8 to 12, one should culture knowledge in following ways. First, one should become a perfect gentleman and learn to give proper respect to others. Should I read?
Yeah, you can read up to 5 points, then Mother Satya, and then after that Mother Manchu and Mother Sumana can read. So, Hare Krishna, please see if any of these fit into any of those 4 or 5 categories: students, scientists, professionals, etc. The first point is about humility. One should become a perfect gentleman and learn to give proper respect to others, means humility. Yes, go ahead.
Second, one should not pose himself as a religionist simply for name and fame.
Okay.
Third, one should not become a source of anxiety to others by the actions of his body, by the thoughts of his mind, or by his words. If
you see the first 3 points, the first point goes for students, isn't it? The way they are trained today, they have no culture or respect for even teachers, what to speak of elders. Second goes for false gurus. One should not pose himself as a religionist simply for name and fame. And third goes to professional and scientists. One should not become a source of anxiety to others by the action of his body, by the thoughts of his mind, by his words. Particularly goes for the scientists, because kind of a research which has been done largely today, they're creating more and more technology to destroy lives rather than saving lives. That's a point here. Please continue. Next, 4th and 5th point.
One should learn forbearance even in the face of provocation from others. Fifth, one should learn to avoid duplicity in his dealings with others.
All right. Mother Satya.
One should search out a bona fide spiritual master who can lead him gradually to the stage of spiritual realization, and one must submit himself to such a spiritual master, render him service, and ask relevant questions. In order to approach the platform of self-realization, one must follow the regulative principles enjoined in the revealed scriptures. One must be fixed in the tenets of the revealed scriptures. One should completely refrain from practices which are detrimental to the interest of self-realization. One should not accept more than he requires for the maintenance of the body. One should
Yes, Mother Manchu can go ahead. 11th point.
One should not falsely identify himself with the gross material body, nor should one consider those who are related to his body to be his own. 12th point. One should always remember that as long As he has a material body, he must face the miseries of repeated birth, old age, disease, and death. There is no use in making plans to get rid of these miseries of the material body. The best course is to find out the means by which one may regain his spiritual identity. One should not be attached to more than the necessities of life required for spiritual advancement. One should not be more attached to wife, children, and home than the revealed scripture ordained. One should not be happy or distressed over desirables and undesirables, knowing that such feelings are just created by the mind.
Thank you. Mother Sumana?
One should become an unalloyed devotee of the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna and serve him with rapt attention. One should develop a liking for residence in a secluded place with a calm and quiet atmosphere favorable for spiritual culture, and one should avoid congested places where non-devotees congregate. One should become a scientist or philosopher and conduct research into spiritual knowledge, recognizing that spiritual knowledge is permanent, whereas material knowledge ends with the death of the body.
So, Naveen Prabhu, you can go ahead and read the next paragraph.
Okay. These 18 items combine to form a gradual process by which real knowledge can be developed. Except for these, all other methods are considered to be in the category of nuisance. Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, a great Acharya, maintained that all forms of material knowledge are merely external features of the illusory energy, and that by cutting them, one becomes no better than an ass.
Cultivating them or
this
culturing.
Same principle is
not cutting them, either culturing them or cultivating them.
Culturing them, okay. This same principle is found here in Śrī Īśopaniṣad. By advancement of material knowledge, modern man is simply being converted into an ass. Some materialistic politician in spiritual guise decry the present system of civilization as satanic, but unfortunately they do not care about the culture of real knowledge as it is described in the Bhagavad Gita. Thus they cannot change the satanic situation.
Yes. So this is something that is just a side point. If you would like, you can make a note. Hare Krishna. If you would like, you can make note of these all 18 points and stuck it anywhere on your door, maybe a mirror, and see it every day. To what degree I'm able to practice it. Prabhupada says this is a gradual way of cultivating knowledge. And none of these points, none of these things are being discussed or taught to a student today in their school system or the college system. Nothing of that. We already discussed about the deplorable situation of the student, of the colleges and the schools, where the minds of the young men and women becomes more and more sensual, more and more greedy. Their subtle body gets so much contaminated in the environment that we have in school and colleges today. So Prabhupada says these are the items. Need to have purity of mind, purity of consciousness. One should not be attached to more than necessary. So many beautiful points. So this is called as culture of knowledge, and everything else is called as ignorance. So let's going back quickly to the slide. Let's take a look at this point, which we just saw. Amanitvam, humility. As we said, this is for students particularly, and this point. So if you see, when you talk about modern science today, Prabhupada talked a lot about, Prabhupada said, the modern education system makes a person an ass. If you look at the modern science today, science or scientists are supposed to be Brahminical. It's a Brahminical activity. But most of the research work is being done by the sponsorship or the patronage of the business houses. In other words, most of the scientists have become a puppet in the hands of Vaishyas. So therefore, whatever their research work is not research work meant necessarily for the well-being of the human society, but only to provide evidences to support the product which has been launched by a particular business house. That if you use this is what benefits you're going to get it. And that's a pathetic situation. So yes, science may be proving many mysteries of the universe, but whatever the modern science is doing, it is only facilitating for or creating a better opportunity for eating, sleeping, and mating. And that is called your consumer industry. Yes or no? all your consumer industry, the huge consumer industry, is all about eating, sleeping, and mating. That is a gift of the modern science. And the other major industry is defense industry, yes? And that is about defending. So if you see, the modern science is only facilitating 4 things: eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. And this is what the true picture of the modern science today. Then we had cleanliness, stharyam and all that. We had discussed this thing. And then we have, one should not be attached to more than the necessity of life required for spiritual advancement. One should not be more attached. So there are some principles discussed about, cultivating right spirit of detachment. Imagine if you have a leader in the society, which are generally politicians today. We know the situation of politicians. If we have a person who is like Dhritarashtra, who is too attached to his seat, then no doubt corruption is just going to follow up. You can't do anything about it. So there was one statistics that said that what British took 200 years to loot India, that the modern day politicians have looted India in 10 years. That is a terrible situation. And there was a joke which one devotee shares, an interesting joke in this regard. When one politician went to visit Europe, and he was visiting one of the MP, member of parliament from Europe, he invited this Indian politician to his house. It was a fantastic place, big mansion. And then the Indian politician asked him, "Sir, how did you build such a huge mansion?" So this member of parliament from British parliament, he brought him to the window of his mansion and he showed him a huge, beautiful mountain, and there was a river, and then there was a bridge across the river. And he said, 50% of the money allocated for the bridge, I used it for building my mansion. So later on, this is a joke by the way, but the joke is not exactly a joke, it's also more or less factual story. So later on, this member of parliament from UK came to India, and this time this Indian politician invited him at his house. So this UK man asked him, "Sir, how did you build a bigger mansion than mine? This is so fabulous." So this Indian politician brought him to the balcony or the window, and he showed him again a beautiful mountain and a beautiful river. And then he said, "What else?" And then he said, "Do you see the missing bridge? 100% of the money went for missing bridge is used here." that's just a joke, okay? Nothing meant to be serious about. That's about the corruption that happens, that's an unfortunate situation. And that's the reason Prabhupada would speak, just like Prabhupada wrote in this paragraph, some materialistic politicians under the cover of spiritual garments, they say the present system of civilization is satanic, but they actually do not care for the real knowledge, which is described in Bhagavad Gita like that. Anyways, let's move forward with this discussion here. So Prabhupada says, these 18 items combine to form a gradual process by which real knowledge can be developed. Except for this, all other methods are considered to be in the category of nescience. And I guess prior to coming to Krishna consciousness, we all had only cultivated nescience. Sorry to say that, but Prabhupada says, probably before coming to Krishna consciousness, we looked a little similar to this picture on the screen right now. An ass with a tie, with a cigarette in the mouth, and a carrot hanging in front of us. How many of you agree with that? If it was not for Krishna consciousness, we would have been Mr. and Mrs. S. What are you going to call it? Yes or no? We were chasing after false dreams which were put forward to us by different propaganda machines. Can anyone give me a purport? I don't know if you have discussed this, but why Prabhupada always says, the modern education has made an ass out of us? Why ass is so famous as an animal when you have to use a derogatory word for a foolish human being? Why not call him a lion? Why don't you call him a buffalo? What is so special with ass in comparison to all other animals? Anyone knows? What is the unique potential of an ass, which means a donkey? That he has got his name in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam commentary of Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Anshul.
So Prabhu, ass works very hard to get a grass, which he can get for free, like other cattle get for free. So he kind of does the useless labor.
That's the point actually. is a fruitless pursuit of sense gratification. So Prabhupada explains, earlier the way of training the donkey or an ass was, the master would hang a fresh carrot in front of his face, and then he will fill his back with a heavy luggage, and the monkey would walk ahead to catch hold of the carrot, and like that the monkey will get trained all day to get the carrot. At the end of the day, the master will not give him a fresh piece of carrot, but would give him the dry piece of carrot which has got dried up all through the day, and the ass is happy with it, and he continues carrying the luggage the same way, day after day, week after week, and year after year. That is why it is said, the foolish man does not understand his pitiable condition, and he continues to work like an ass, thinking that I will be happy in future, but that future never comes. That is the reason mentioned here. So avidya leads to undesirable qualities. Now Prabhupada is going to talk about how, the schools, the nationalism, etc. Prabhupada will discuss. So let's take a look at the purport now. So this was about the qualities, 18 qualities. Apart from this, everything is ignorance. So let's go to the purport now. Whoever has not spoken, have read now, they can read it. Mother Leela, your hand is up. Please read.
Hare Krishna. In the modern setup of things, even a boy thinks himself self-sufficient and pays no respect to elderly men. Thus, due to the wrong type of education imparted by our universities, boys all over the world have become the cause of headache to the elderly people. Therefore, Śrī Īśopaniṣad warns very strongly that the culture of nuisance is different from that of knowledge. The universities are, so to speak, centers of nuisance only, and therefore the scientists are busy discovering lethal weapons to wipe out the existence of other countries. University students today are not given instructions on the regulative principles of brahmacharya, the spiritual process of life, nor do they have any faith in the respective spiritual injunctions. Religious principles are taught for the sake of name and fame only, and not for the matter of practical action. Therefore, there is animosity not only in the social and political fields, but in the field of religion as well. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. I'll give a food for thought. It's time for a break here now, and after that we go for a break. We are discussing of a theme where it is established that avidya gives you one result and vidya gives you one result. And I'd like to a little bit speak about the Vedic culture and why certain things would happen in a certain manner. And I'd like to raise a question about the child marriage for a brief discussion here right now. What was the importance of a child marriage? And how child marriage actually was a more progressive way of living than what is seen as today. Of course, it can become a subject of debate, so I'm not here for debating. I'm just going to present you a perspective of it. You think aloud about it. If it makes sense, accept it. If not, anyways, none of you here of the marriageable age, you're already married. So that's not a point here that we're trying to say somebody should get married in a child age, which is not possible in today's environment. But what was the Vedic culture? Why it was perfectly designed? Because Krishna said, Chaturvarnya Maya Shrishtam. I did that. So how Krishna's system was perfect, we need to at least understand and acknowledge that. We may or may not practice, that's a different thing. So, child marriage, what was its importance and advantage? Before I give some clues here or some points about it, anyone would like to mention, if in case they have any idea, what was the advantage of it to the lives of an individual and to the society? Yes. It'll be nice, those who are speaking, if they have at least camera on at that point of time. Yes, go ahead, Jay.
Probably it's probably because both the parties involved, like both the girl and boy, they will be knowing from a very young age that when they are supposed to get married. And exactly opposite is happening now. People are just their senses are running here and there. They are looking for opposite gender on social media, on dating apps, and it is just there is Varna Sankarshan, what is mentioned here.
Fine. There's a very interesting statement which says modern education at best can make you distracted, and at worst will make you deplorable, which means totally characterless. The best the modern education can give you can make you a distracted person, which means your senses become so agitated and disturbed, you easily get distracted. And the worst, which means it destroys your character entirely. So even the best is worst. What to speak of the worst then? That's modern education. What else? Mother Mayapur Shashi, if in case you have raised your hand for this.
Connection might be getting cut and all. I am very much in favor of child.
Mother, there is a lot of disturbance, unfortunately. Can't hear you. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, I feel that in a formative year, the child learns to adjust with the family and to understand the other people and learn to obey the people there in the in-laws' family.
Thank you.
So that sort of thing can help the child to adjust better in the family.
Thank you.
So I am not very much in favor of it, but yes.
Well, my question is not at all promoting child marriage or not. No, I'm not talking about it. Neither I'm collecting any opinion from you. That's the reason I said this is not a point of debate. Is child marriage is right or wrong? I'm trying to talk about how Vedic culture was perfect and why and how it was designed. So today child marriage is not possible, sort of question. So please don't take that discussion on that side. Favor or not favor is not a point. Mother Ishma, let's take one last input from you. Unmute yourself. Yes.
I had heard in one of the Krishna Leelas that the young gopis were married to the gopas because they get used to serving their husband, and when they're grown up, they are perfect in their services.
Okay, thank you. So you'll have to hear it with an open mind, and let me give you a reason for it. One aspect of it. Look at the modern society. I'll talk about the modern society first, the modern youth, both the boys and girls today. If you look at our own, psychology or physiognomy, as they say, until we hit teenagers, boy and girl do not even recognize what is a boy and a girl. Agreed? Yes or no? We have to be quick in response. Yes? But the moment we become teenagers, the greatest binding force in this material world is a sexual desire. And that begins to manifest, and that's the time when we begin to differentiate between man and woman. Now in our modern culture, if you see, when we have kind of gradually forget about child marriage, even a point has come now in the Western society where the concept of marriage is also debated. Where they say, why to get married at all? Ultimately, what you have to do post-marriage, if it is possible to you with a live-in partner, then why to get married? Why to take responsibility? Keep on changing partners, no legal obligation and all that. That's the situation has come. So the one who has gone through this modern culture and environment, that person, I'm not commenting anything for a woman here right now, but for a man, he can never ever learn to see other women as a mother. For such a man, a woman becomes totally an object of exploitation. Wherever such a lust-filled man looks or puts his eyes is only for exploiting an opposite gender. So what I meant to say, in today's environment and culture is so much filled with lust. And same thing may hold true for the woman also towards an opposite gender. And that's the reason for modern generation to expect any culture, any respect, any focus that becomes so difficult, because they're already too distracted with sensual engagements. And to make things work, then you have internet and social media, which facilitates easily this aspect of facilitation of this kind of lustful desires and whatnot with internet, all kind of movies and those kind of a thing. Now, environment which is around us is nothing but a conglomeration of our consciousness. If in a forum of 10 people, if you have one person whose consciousness is contaminated with lustful thought, immediately the environments get contaminated. And now, even if you have a deities in front of you, you cannot really worship properly. I'll give you one very simple example. You remember Chaitanya Mahaprabhu dancing in the courtyard of Srivas Pandit? Of course, that was not an example of lust, But there, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, there is somebody who does not fit into the forum. What was the thing? The consciousness was not aligning with the consciousness of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mood and of all the devotees there. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, I cannot feel ecstasy. You remember that? He said, who is that who is not exactly fitting into the forum now? And that was a milk drinking brahmachari. And then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu chastised him and all that. So consciousness gets really affected with it. And in today's environment, such is a situation. And look what is the end result? Divorces, faithlessness, so many problems. Can you imagine what will happen to the kids? They lived with a couple who they called as a mother and father, and after 10 years, the husband and wife splits up, and the husband has a new wife, the wife has a new husband, and 1 week they're with them, another week they're with them, and the new father doesn't love them, the new mother doesn't love them. It's a whole disaster. Imagine these kids grow up, they have been so abused in their consciousness while they grow up, how can they ever be part of a good social structure? And that leads to more crimes, more disorientation, more frustration, and more kind of violence and other things like that. This is what avidya gives. Now let's take a look back, go back to this Vedic culture where you had a child marriage. From the childhood, every man was taught, because that was a part of Vedic culture, every mother, matravat paradareshu, paradarveshu lostravat, every mother, every woman, except for your wife, is a mother. Now all these experiences, this lustful experiences begins to manifest in the heart, which had already been there in the form of a bija, but they manifest as a prarabdha when your body is ready to act on it, which means teenage years. Now at that point of time, before you start doing window shopping, at that point of time, your parents tie you with another woman, and a woman is tied with another man. Now their mind, there is no question of their mind getting distracted. They have grown up in a culture where they are taught every woman is your mother, except for your wife. And the point of time in their life when they understand the difference between male and female, and they have been already fixed in marriage, and a surety has been given, this is your wife, or a lady has been told, this is your husband. That need has been taken care. Now they're not going to look around with any woman with any lustful thought. And that is a reason, even up to 100 years before, there were hardly ever a case of divorce. There were never a divorce in Vedic culture, Vedic society for that. People grew up so nicely, there was a culture, there was a sense of faith, there was a respect among women, for the man, among men, and people lived happily all through their life. And you're not being tormented with the lustful thoughts, with the things which are being put forward in front of you through the means of media, through the means of books, through the means of cartoon and whatnot. They were happy all through their life. I'll give one small example. We were in Jaipur 10 years ago. Not 10 years ago. That was 20 years ago. That was 98, 99, more than that. And my parents were already 55, 50 plus that time. So we were with our family friend, and some film shooting was going on. Akshay Kumar and Kareena Kapoor or somebody. Kareena Kapoor, right? Yeah. So I believe they were there. So we had never seen them in a real life like that. So the police said, you cannot go out of the fort right now because there's a shooting crew is coming in. So please wait for them to come in, and then once they come in, they'll go. So then shooting crew, when they came, this heroine was there, Akshay Kumar was there and all that. So of course, I'm just making a point here. So it was a joke. My father's friend said, oh, this is a man's talk, just a side joke here. He said, look how beautiful she is. As a joke, he said. And my father said, for me, my wife is my Kareena Kapoor. And I was a young boy that time. That kind of really stuck my little thought process at that point of time. The culture before was such, the man would never ever look elsewhere. And similarly would hold true for a woman, because this kind of aspect was not there in our life. So even how much they have, kind of a contention, they have a debate on things that they like or not like, but they would never come to a thought. This thought would never even run through their mind that we can get divorced. They would live as a family unit, live through, and be part of the community, and nobody would complain about anyone's behavior to anyone, because there were never ever such a thought. But look what is the society today. That is the reason I said Vidya and Avidya takes you to two different paths. So to put a hold on to it, I am not here to favor child marriage. That was a point to bring it, how Vedic culture was perfectly organized. Once you are settled, by 18 or 20 years, the man and woman would have 2-3 kids, or by let's say 22. I mean, after that, anyways, you don't have any much, you have gone through the whole experience of it. There's nothing. You're stable in your consciousness. And the person can very easily retire by the age of 50, because now he has to make sure the kids grow up, they get settled. By the age of 50, he can retire with a single consciousness, full focus. He can now dedicate himself to the service of the Lord. And they had memory, they had a long-lived memory, as unlike today we have. So that is what I just wanted to bring you a little bit of, awareness and understanding of what was Vedic culture and what the modern society did, which is entirely based on avidya, whereas Vedic culture was based on actually Vedic knowledge, how they took us to different paths. Even your personal life in this world, even if you did not believe in God, at least you had some life. Today there is no meaning to life only. People are so fearful. All right, with that little thought, we'll pause here. We'll continue after, don't mind, we'll take a 5-minute break today, okay? Although we had decided 10-minute break, we'll meet after 5 minutes, because at least I want to finish this. 10th verse can be finished. I want to finish 11th verse also, so we can next week start with the next hymn. All right, so it's 1:40 IST. We come back at 1:45. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. So Hare Krishna. So we are discussing from the 10th verse of Śrī Īśopaniṣad.
Recording in progress.
Where Srila Prabhupada or the mantra talks about the results of avidya are different from the results of vidya. And Prabhupada in his initial purport talks about how to culture or how to cultivate knowledge. And he gives 18 steps for it. In that, accepting Krishna as a Supreme Personality Godhead, Acharya Pasanam, accepting a bona fide Guru, are said to be very, very important aspects of it. And of course, refraining from anything that hampers one's spiritual progress, like that. These are all said to be these aspects when we begin to practice in our life. This is how we cultivate true knowledge, like that. And then we talked about one of the last discussion that we had, how in the modern set of things, we're going to discuss this paragraph now, but the other thing that we had a discussion about, why the point was material advancement of knowledge means actually converting a human being to the status of an S. So we talked about, what's so special with S, and after discussing with that, we talked about how we gave a case study or an example of a Vedic culture with a modern society, that how they're entirely heading into two different directions. We don't have to wait to see its results in the future. The person can experience the results of it, either of the path that he chooses in his or her life, even in the present situation at the moment. And we gave an example of, the child marriage. What was the scientific reason was it? The concept of child marriage. To allow a human being, to give an opportunity to a human being to live a life as a human and not to degrade to the lives of animal, where he's always conscious of only sensual engagements. And now we'll discuss ahead. Let's read from the Prabhupada purport. Somebody who has not read or spoken so far can read it. In the modern setup, I guess we discussed this also, right? Yeah, we discussed. Therefore, Śrī Īśopaniṣad strongly warns us about the culture of niche science. Yeah, this paragraph we had already discussed. Next paragraph, university students. Mother Poonam, go ahead. University students today are not given instructions on the regulatory principles.
University students. Nationalism.
Oh, actually, yeah, sorry.
Nationalism.
Yeah, that whole paragraph was one. Okay, wait a second. So Vedic society I have explained, and I have also spoken about the principle of lust. Prabhupada talks about brahmacharya here. So we discussed that, fine. religious principles are taught for the sake. Great. So now nationalism. So we talked about the school and the colleges and what is the situation now. Now Prabhupada comes to nationalism subject. Yes, please read from nationalism.
Yes, sir. Nationalism has developed in different parts of the world due to cultivation of license by the general people. No one considers that this tiny earth is just a lump of matter floating in immeasurable space, along with many other lumps. In comparison to the vastness of space, these material lumps are like dust particles in the air, because God has kindly made these lumps of matter complete in themselves. They are perfectly equipped with all necessities for floating in space. The drivers of our spaceship may be very proud of their achievements, but they do not consider the supreme driver of these greater, more gigantic spaceships called planets.
Correct.
There are, yes.
So, in one lecture, Prabhupada said, nationalism is also nothing but an avidya. Now, why Prabhupada said nationalism was also avidya? Because entirely based on the gross idea of, because I am born into this country, so this land is mine. You know, of course, Pandavas also fought, but they did not fought for a piece of land. They fought for dharma. For the establishment of dharma, Lord Shri Krishna encouraged Pandavas to fight, not for a chunk of land, because Lord Shri Krishna had already said, Yudhishthira, you can go and ask for 5 villages also. If Kauravas are willing to give you, the fight can be, let go. But when the Kauravas did not agree, then there was a fight for dharma like that. Then second thing Prabhupada here talks about, extending on the idea of nationalism. He's saying people are fighting like cats and dogs for a tract of land. But they don't understand that in this whole vast space, planet Earth is just a very tiny, insignificant planet. The unlimited planets, because they are so much caught up into thinking this is my land, that is their land and all that, they are not able to think about rest of the universe, who created that universe and who that personality is. Because they are stuck in such a narrow-mindedness. And on top of it, Prabhupada quotes about this satellite launch and whatnot, where Prabhupada said, our Sputnik drivers are very proud of their achievements, but they do not look to the supreme driver of these greater, more gigantic Sputniks called planets. And this year, there had been a whole race of putting a man into the orbit, into the space. How many of you are aware of it? Amazon founders Jeff Bezos, I believe, and also, what is that? Virgin Atlantic, that owner, I forgot the name. He had a
Branson.
What's his name?
I think it's Branson.
Branson, yes. Branson, yes. He had gone into space. How many of you, by the way, saw that video? Or you were excited to see that, the man going into the space. So when I got that, even I saw it. And really, the kind of sense of excitement is there. And Prabhupada is saying, the same point is mentioned. Our Sputnik drivers are very proud of the achievement. So when Branson had gone into the space before the NASA and the Amazon's partnership project, and when they came back to Earth, they just flew into the sky, which birds do every morning and evening nonetheless. So they were so happy about it that they had a whole party and everything. So I was remembering of the statement Prabhupada writes here. Our Sputnik drivers are very proud of their achievements, but they do not look to the supreme driver of this greater, more gigantic Sputnik called planet, isn't it? If you went on top, then you should realize, this is not the only planet. There are so many planets. Who is controlling and managing it? They don't get that kind of thought. So that's the point Prabhupada was saying, and these people keep on fighting for petty issues. And then Prabhupada says, there are innumerable suns occupying space. Mother Shri Lakshmi, please read ahead.
There are innumerable suns and innumerable planetary systems also, as infinitesimal parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. We small creatures are trying to dominate these unlimited planets. Thus we take repeated birth and death and are generally frustrated by old age and disease. The span of human life is scheduled for about 100 years. although it is gradually decreasing to 20 or 30 years. Thanks to the culture of Nescience, befooled men have created their own nations within these planets in order to grasp sense enjoyment more effectively for these few years. Such foolish people draw up various plans to render national demarcations perfectly, a task that is totally impossible. Yet for this purpose, each and every nation has become a source of anxiety for others. More than 50% of a nation's energy is devoted to defense measures and thus spoiled. No one cares for the cultivation of real knowledge, yet people are falsely proud of being advanced in both material and spiritual knowledge.
Again, Prabhupada is building on the theme how avidya and vidya takes you to different result. Alexander the Great. It's very interesting. I don't know who coined the word the Great, because he did not do any one good thing in his life, if in case you know about Alexander. He was a young man at the age of 16. He went out onto a rampage all over the world up to the age of 31 approximately, and must have killed hundreds and thousands of people like that. He even came to India also. That was 3rd BC, somewhere around 300 BC that he had come to India and had one larger part of India at that point of time. So he just traveled all over the world, killed people, defeated people and so forth. And yet he's called Alexander the Great. What one good thing he did? He died at a very early age. He died at the age of 31. And there was one sadhu who he met on the way, you know. So let me just recall that story. It was a very interesting story that happened between the sadhu and Alexander actually. So I'm missing little details of it, but I remember the conversation. I don't understand how did they both met. Maybe Alexander wanted to meet him or something was there. I believe Alexander's guru or Alexander's father, somebody had asked him to bring, Indian monk. So he had met this Indian monk, and the discussion began to happen between them about what is the goal of life? What do you want in your life? You know. So Alexander had been searching out. So he said, my goal of life is to go and win over the world. So this monk asked, what will you do after winning over the world? He said, then I'll build a big palace for myself. He said, what will you do after building a palace? So he began to think. He said, I'll get married to 100 most beautiful women in this world. He said, what will you do after getting married to 100 beautiful women in this world? Well, I'll have many kids with them. He said, what will you do after that? Now he began to really think about it. He had not thought that far. He said, oh, well, then I'll divide my whole kingdom between my sons. And again the sage asked, what will you do after dividing your kingdom amongst your sons? Then he was really clueless. Then he said, then finally I will sit down peacefully. So the monk said, well, you can come and sit next to me. I'm sitting very peacefully. Why you have to do all this hard work? And then after that, you realize, you sit peacefully. I'm sitting peacefully. Come and sit next to me. You can sit peacefully today also. So I actually, if you see from the perspective of a spiritualist, Alexander should not be given the title of Alexander the Great. He should be given the title Alexander the Greatest Fool the world ever saw. Because he went on only killing people, never lived his life. At a very young age of 32, he died because somebody 6 months ago had attacked him because of one of his own men. And because of the wound, he developed a disease. There are different stories about he died. There's no clarity, but this is one of the story. And he died at an early age. What is the value of all your wealth, of all your possessions and all your kingdom when you never had a chance and opportunity to enjoy your life? Isn't it? Even from a perspective of fulfilling your material desires, he didn't have that opportunity. So to say Alexander the Great just doesn't make sense. So this is what is being explained here. Prabhupada says, people are so foolish. They fight over a small tract of land when nothing is going to remain with them. The land is going to continue in the hands of somebody else. But they fight, people kill each other for such a petty issues. And because of which they never think about what is real knowledge or what should be the real goal, like that. Have I spoken about the letter which was written by one of the survivor of the Jewish, the concentration camp? The letter which was written post Second World War? Okay. we're talking about the modern education in the state today. So there was this Jew who had survived the concentration camp, and 10 years later he wrote a letter about the state of modern education. And he said, what the modern education back in 1950s is writing, what our education system has made a human being into. And then he described the most of the people, if you know of concentration camp, are you aware of the concentration camps? So many books have been written, so it's something you will be aware of it, about concentration camp. So Hitler had given a free hand to his doctors and military people to do whatever they wanted with Jews, and they were treated worse than animals. So a live medical experiments was performed on the living body without anesthesia. They were cut open a liver to see if this particular treatment will work or not. So they were trying to figure out how to heal the wounds of their soldiers quickly. So they would perform all the experiments on a living Jew by tying him on a table, creating a same wound on his body, and then trying to operate it and see if it works. So they were really tortured like that. Leela Nandini is saying, Mother Leela Nandini is saying, Alexander realized it before death. I don't know which point it is. If you're talking about his 3 instructions, which he said, which is again credited to Alexander, the 3 lessons from death, but that is debatable. It is not actually by him. They say it was somebody else. But nonetheless, coming back to the point here, Jew. So this man who survived that, he wrote a letter saying that we were treated by educated doctors who were performing live experiment on other human beings, and many times these human beings were their neighbors with whom they lived all through their life peacefully. He said, is this what the modern education is supposed to do with the human being? The doctors were supposed to help save us from suffering or causing suffering to us, and this is what the modern education have done. And that's the point. The modern education, the modern culture only takes us to the path of destruction, as been explained here. So now, how do we understand the results of avidya and vidya are different? For us to understand that, we need to hear from a sober person, and that is the concluding part of the paragraph. Please read now, somebody who has not yet spoken at all. Last 3-4 paragraphs, one by one we can read it. Others don't have their hands up. Okay, so if you're not going to raise your hand, I'm going to call randomly. Narayanan Benurkar Prabhu. So you're on the spotlight now. So go ahead and read out.
These are innumerable suns and innumerable planetary systems also, as infested parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, which small creatures are trying to dominate these unlimited planets. Thus we take repeated births and deaths and generally frustrated by old age and diseases. The span of human life is scheduled for about 100 years, although it is gradually decreasing to 20 to 30 years, thanks to the culture of...
Prabhuji, we have read that paragraph. You have to read the next paragraph. Śrī Īśopaniṣad warns us of this faulty type of education.
Yeah, Śrī Īśopaniṣad warns us this faulty type of education, and the Bhagavad Gita gives instructions as to the instructions to development of real knowledge, and the mantra states that instructions of the Vidya knowledge must be acquired from a dhira. A dhira is one who is not disturbed by material illusions. No one can be undisturbed unless he is perfectly spiritually realized, at which time one neither hampers nor laments for anything. A dhira realizes that the material body and mind he has acquired by chance, though material associations are but foreign elements, therefore he simply makes the best use of a bad bargain. The material body and mind are bad bargains for the spiritual living entity. The living entity has actual functions in the living spiritual world, but this material world is dead. As long as the living spiritual sparks manipulate and dead lumps of matter, the dead world appears to be a living world. Actually, it is the living souls, the parts and parcels of the supreme living beings who move the world. The Dhiras have come to know all these facts by hearing them from the superior authorities and have realized this knowledge by following the regulative principles.
Thank you, Prabhuji. So, Dhira is very important. Prabhupada says, as the verse says, we should hear from Dhira. We don't get realization just by reading. The realization we also get when we hear from a realized person. Nectar of Instruction will read, where it is mentioned in one of the purport. Prabhupada says, the student can gain realization up to the degree the teacher has a realization. So if you are hearing from a person who is materialistic oriented, you'll never get a spiritual cultivation. So therefore it is very important from whom we hear. So hearing, I have said it before, I believe in this forum also, we have a lot of teachers available online on YouTube and whatnot. We have TV serials or the channels like Asta Sanskar. There are many wonderful personalities, charming personalities. They speak something very attractively. Fine, you may or not hear, it's a personal choice, but you have to always ask, to whom are they connected? For whom have they got training? And we should have some understanding of the lineage, then only we can be sure that we are on the right path, the right track. That is something very important that we need to take care of it. Otherwise, in this world where unlimited speakers are available on online, you just type in Bhagavad Gita on YouTube. I find, I guess every public speaker has spoken something on Bhagavad Gita. And if you begin to go by which video has the most views, must be the best video, then you probably end up becoming somebody else, isn't it? So that's a point here about the Dhira that we should be careful of. And now let's come to the last two paragraphs about the importance of following regulative principles and again education and culture. Mother Raj Lakshmi, please go ahead, unmute yourself and read.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? To follow the regulative principles, one must take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. The transcendental message and regulative principles come down from the spiritual master to the disciple. Such knowledge does not come in the hazardous way of decent education. One can become a dhira only by submissively hearing from a bona fide spiritual master. Arjuna, for example, became a dhira by submissively hearing from Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead himself. Thus, the perfect disciple must be like Arjuna, and the spiritual master must be as good as the Lord himself. This is the process of learning Vidya from the dhira.
Please continue. Last paragraph.
An adhira, one who has not undergone the training of a dhira, cannot be an instructive leader. Modern politicians who pose themselves as dhiras are actually adhiras, and one cannot expect perfect knowledge from them. They are simply busy seeing to their own remuneration in dollars and cents. How then can they lead the mass of people to the right path of self-realization? Thus one must hear submissively from a dhira in order to attain actual education.
A very important point. Of course, that may not be of a direct concern to us. But the point here is, as Prabhupada is saying, that who is a dhira who has himself heard from another dhira? There has to be a lineage and a parampara. So as the point I was making before, there are many charismatic personalities and they may really impress with their speech and whatnot. I remember when I was growing up, I was probably in my, that was the first year of engineering, and my parents had shifted to Indore for a while. They were there for a few years. So I had gone on a summer vacation there, and I don't know how I ended up subscribing for one communication program. I don't know what exactly was it. And there was this Gujarati Babu who had come on the stage and he was speaking. And I'll tell you, he was such an incredible speaker. Physically, he was like a bamboo stick. Bilkul halka phalka sa. But when he will speak, he'll roar. And he would had that potency with him that if he has to speak for 2-3 hours also, nobody can blink their eyes. That potential, that power he had. Point is, these are karmic results. These are, because some pious activities, people have got that ability and skill set. That does not make somebody as a genuine guru. And I remember all of us, I was a young student, all of us had become such a big fan, because speech is very powerful indeed. Somebody can speak with certain authority and can, sound attractive. We naturally get attracted to that person. I remember I had kept in touch with him for a good almost 1 year. And it was like, idolizing, oh, Prabhu, hi, yes, of course, there was no Prabhu then. What a great person, what a great speech and all that. So we have to be careful. And we are fortunate in that way that we are ultimately and finally, God knows after how many lifetimes, we have got connected to a parampara through Srila Prabhupada, where we finally have an access to true knowledge and a forum of devotees where we have an opportunity to continue to learn and grow, even in the absence of Srila Prabhupada, through his disciples and grand disciples. So that's our great fortune that we all have got it. And this is something that we all should be proud of the good fortune, not proud of oneself. The good fortune that we have got being connected to Srila Prabhupada in this wonderful institution. I guess that's the only thing we could be proud of. There is everything else, there's nothing else to be proud of in true sense. So with that, we come to the end of 10th shloka, which very clearly describes the different results one we get from Vidya and Avidya. We'll quickly take a look at the slide. So the summary, culturing knowledge and e-science. What happened with culturing knowledge? 18 items. And this knowledge should be acquired from a dhira. That is the point here. Who is a dhira? Who is not disturbed by illusions, spiritually realized, neither hankers or laments, makes best use of bad bargain, which is of the body. Submissively hears from a superior source, which means he must have heard from his own teacher, who must be dhira also. Follows regular principles, very important. Culturing nescience. What is culturing nescience? Everything else except for 18 items of knowledge. What is the nature? People are falsely proud. They are only seeking after their own gains. They cannot cause any positive change in one's own life and others. And they are too influenced by the external energy of the Lord Maya. And Prabhupada calls them as an ass. What are the examples where people culture this nescience? Universities, scientists, politicians are some of these examples. And what is the result of cultivating nescience? Boys do not respect elders. Prabhupada made that point about college students. The scientists are producing more and more lethal weapons to destroy. There is no brahmachari training on the sense control to the university students. There is no faith in scriptures, because of which there is a lot of greed. Because lust is allowed to flourish. There's a lot of greed which leads to animosity. And Prabhupada says any nation today is spending almost 50% of their GDP on developing more and more weapons of mass destruction. And the result is repetition of birth and death. And I'll conclude this by a social study by a social psychologist by the name of David G. Myers. He had written a book by the name of American Paradox. It's a big subject matter. I'll just speak 1-2 points about it. He had studied the American social structure from 1960 up to 1990, effectively 1995. And he said what had happened in the society today. 1960, just very brief, the woman empowerment movement, the woman liberation movement started, which was not started by the woman, it was started by the men to exploit women, and the women actually got exploited more. So he said up to 1960, this is American case study, and up to 1960, more than 90% people in the America were householders, were married. Of course, he doesn't talk much about divorce at that time, but definitely the divorce rate was very, very less. 30 years forward, he says almost 80%, almost 75 to 80% people are not married or do not want to get married. Has had such a huge shift in 30-40 years. What to speak of 2010, 2020, there's hardly any marriages happen now. There are live-in relationship in America for a long, long time. So what had happened because of this whole woman liberation movement and the things that they wanted to bring on the context of giving more freedom to women and liberation and whatnot, it has destroyed the whole social structure. And now he says the crime rate have quadrupled in 30 years. Why it has quadrupled? He says marriage institution is very important to make a man responsible and to keep his senses under control. Because the man is unmarried, a single man is a great threat to the society, which he concludes through his case study. They tend to be more violent, more abusive, and more criminally oriented. Along with this, because of this whole bringing this notion of the lady should be liberated from household affairs, she should be a working woman, what had happened? The divorce rate has doubled. The teen society rate has tripled. Prison population has quintupled. The percentage of babies born to unmarried parents has sextupled. Depression has soared to 10 times the pre-World War II level. There are many conclusions he draws, and I'll give you one final case study that he quotes. It was back in 1995 or 94 when President Bush I was the president of America, and it was, I believe, University of California who wanted to invite Mrs. President, which means the wife of the Bush senior, like that. And that point of time, there was a boycott in the university by the university students, particularly led by the ladies, the women. And they said, we do not want to invite Mrs. President for our convocation. And then the reason was asked to the students, what's your problem? You know what was the reason given by them? They said, what has she contributed to the society and to her life? All her life she had been just a housewife. So she is a blemish to the society. We cannot allow her to come here and address all of the students. So Dr. May writes, that is the shift of change that had happened. And what is the result? The result is up on the slide. Now you don't have to wait for a misery in the next life. Misery is right then and there in this life when you have so much crime rates and troubles rising up. With that, we come to the conclusion. Different results are obtained like that. And let's go quickly to text number 11 now. Now in text number 11, discussion comes about cultivating both Vidya and Avidya together. What does it say? Vidyam cha yastad vedo bhayam saha avidyaya mityum titva vidya amritamashnute. Only one who can bring the process of nescience and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. Vidyams cha avidyams cha, which means one need to harmonize his material needs with that of spiritual advancement through proper understanding of scriptures. Now, this does not mean that one has to stop his bodily maintenance entirely. There is no question of stopping bodily maintenance, because body is an instrument, acts as an instrument for us to perform or engage in spiritual activities like that. So what we have to do? We have to make a best use of bad bargain, which means utilize the facility which is given to us in a human form of life and cultivate spiritual goal or spiritual knowledge. However, the challenge that we face as an individual, those who are in married life, those who are grahasthas, at times they get very easily carried away with only bodily needs and they compromise their spiritual needs and spiritual progress. On brahmacharis, on the other side, there could be other way around, where they may get caught up too much with the spiritual side of the life and they may not pay attention to the needs of the body and of the mind like that, and again lead to crisis. So this verse is telling us we need to harmonize our bodily needs with our spiritual advancement. Not spiritual need, but spiritual advancement. Like it is said, we are not this body but a spirit soul. This statement should not be taken out of context. It does not mean that we stop treating our body as our own. It does not mean that we have to abuse our body, we have to ignore our body. That is an extreme end. It means utilize it in the service of the Lord, and to do so, we have to maintain our body. And that should be done at the minimal level. As the previous verse, the culture of knowledge, there it was mentioned, not to be too possessed, too attached to things, and be content with what comes into one's life like that. I just realized it's almost 14 to 20 years. I'll not be able to cover 11th verse today. I'll just give you overview in another 3-4 minutes, then we'll open a forum if in case anyone has any question. So what's the connection here? Mantra 10 has explained the culture of knowledge has a different result from culture of ignorance, and Mantra 11 declares what is that result. Text 11 gives you the result, describes what is the result one gets when one cultivates that real knowledge, and that result is Amritam Ashnute, one attains eternity or eternal life. Vidya Amritam Ashnute. What's the main theme of this verse? The problems of repeated birth and death cannot be solved by the advancement of material knowledge, but only by the culture of transcendental knowledge. Only by culture of transcendental knowledge. There's an interesting pastime that comes in Ramayana. Narad Muni at once had come to meet Ravana. And during the course of discussion, Ravana got really upset with Narad Muni, where Narad Muni had instructed Ravana to do things which he didn't like. He took out his sword and he attacked Narad Muni. With all his might, he threw his sword at Narad Muni, and that sword went all through the body of Narad Muni. And Ravana was shocked. He couldn't believe. He again swinged it. Again it went through the whole body. Again he swinged it. And after his repeated attempts, after his total utter shock, Ravana fell at his feet. He said, Narad Muni, what is the special magic? I just cannot kill you. Can you please tell me how have you got this special form that cannot be killed, cannot be destroyed? I can't even touch it. So Narad Muni said, oh fool, that is what I have come to tell you here. Whose wife you are kidnapped, that Sita, is a wife of none other than Lord Ram, who is Lord Vishnu himself. If you want immortality like mine, if you want freedom from birth, death, old age and disease, you have to worship Lord Ram, you have to worship Lord Vishnu, you have to worship Lord Shri Krishna. As soon as Ravana heard this, he said, nothing doing. I will become immortal on my own. I would not give Sita. I would fight Ram and I'll defeat him. And that is a point here. That's the difference between a devotee and a non-devotee. Devotee with a simple faith and a simple heart takes shelter of the Lord and moves forward in his life. Whereas a non-devotee like Ravana, he says, I'll build a staircase to the heaven. I'll go to heaven on my own potential, on my own might. Whereas a devotee with his folded hands says, my dear Lord, you want me to go to heaven, you want me to go to hell, you want me to go to spiritual world, wherever you want me to send, I'm willing to go. That is spiritual knowledge. So here in this verse, that's a key subject matter. Only through cultivating real knowledge, one can attain to immortality or the real life. It's a very important purport. We'll take a look at it next time. Where Prabhupada quotes an example of Hiranyakashipu in a context of how immortality is impossible through material advancement. And then Prabhupada says how immortality is possible through following Krishna's teachings. And then Prabhupada says, Krishna, why does Krishna comes to this world? Krishna comes to make us immortal and things like that. That we should see next time now. Oh, by the way, screen is visible? Sorry, I just delayed. So you're able to see the screen now, correct? So that all we'll see next time. For today, we pause here. Thank you all for joining for today's discussion. Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Hare Krishna. So have a wonderful weekend. We'll meet next week. We'll continue. Hare Krishna.